Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Rednecks Rising. Y'all may not have realized this, or maybe you did since it's in the name of today's episode, but today is a big day for the podcast because we are celebrating 10 episodes with today's episode, y'all. I am quite proud of myself for my consistency and my conviction in providing a new episode to you every week for the last 9 weeks. I'm just going to give myself a little pat on the back. I'm not consistent in many areas of my life, but a couple of areas where I am consistent are my love for Appalachia, my disdain for the rich and powerful, and publishing this podcast, apparently. I am super excited about the episode that we are bringing y'all today, and I like to think that today's guest is the perfect guest to spend our 10th episode birthday with for a few reasons. To start with, she was nominated by one of our very own followers and listeners to be interviewed. I had never heard of her before they nominated her, and that's how you know we actually listen to the people around here, unlike our good-for-nothing politicians. And the other reason I like to think that she's perfect for this episode is because the intro music that you just heard was actually a clip of today's guest playing the banjo. Today we talked to Clover-Lynn, an all-around dreamy, incredible banjo player and a blast to talk to. Some of y'all may know her as HillbillyGothic on social media after she got famous on TikTok for using her bluegrass skills to stitch videos and drown out folks who used their TikTok videos to say things that were inappropriate, misogynistic, bigoted, or just downright mean. Clover tells us about growing up in Franklin County, Virginia, and then we do what Appalachians do best, talk about just about everything under the sun. We touch on heritage being washed away by man-made lakes and what it means to be poor. We hear Clover's story behind learning the banjo prior to becoming semi-famous on TikTok. And then she tells us about coming out as trans to religious Appalachian family members. And I want to mention that this does include a trigger warning around religious family and some traumatizing parental responses to coming out as trans. So just to give y'all a heads up, but that doesn't come into play until after we really dig into the subtle difference in Appalachian accents between the highlands, the foothills, and the plateau, and until we ourselves get emotional about reclaiming our own Appalachian accents. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, my friends. We got some business to take care of before we dig into all of that goodness. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to our friend Evan over at Left of the Projector Pod, who threw some love our way on the Ko-Fi, and we appreciate it so much. We got to stick together, us podcasters, especially leftist podcasters. Make sure to give his pod a listen and a follow over on his social media pages at Left of the Projector Pod. If you're new to the Rednecks Rising crew, howdy neighbor. I'm glad you're here. My name is Chelsea, and I'm your host based out of the Great Smoky Mountains of Western North Carolina, where I've lived my whole life. I'm a mom, a community organizer, and a proud Appalachian woman. I started this podcast in an effort to bust myths about Appalachian stereotypes and unveil pieces of Appalachian history that have been hidden and whitewashed by the rich and powerful elite. This podcast is independently produced, which means it is brought to you by black coffee, boxed wine, and more than one mental health prescription. But mostly it's made possible by our amazing collection of supporters over on our Ko-Fi and our social media followers. Our Ko-Fi, coffee? I don't know. Honestly, y'all, I might have been pronouncing this wrong the whole time, but please let me know. That page is an alternative to Patreon for those who are familiar with that platform. And you can find us over there at ko-fi.com/rednecksrising. And over on that page, you'll be able to become a monthly contributor to the pod for as little as $1 a month to help us cover the cost of publishing and all that jazz. You can also choose to throw a tip our way if you wanted to just do a one-time contribution, or you can buy yourself a piece of sick merch that just went live in the shop and you can contribute in that way. For those who can't or don't want to make a financial contribution, another great way to do your part to keep this podcast alive and well is to subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. Leave us a good review, follow us on social media, and share us with your friends. In the next episode, episode 11, I'll be announcing the final amount of money that we will be sending over to the Pulaski County Free Store on behalf of the pod from the financial contributions that we received from y'all up through the end of July. In case you missed it, every month our intention is to take half of the profits from your contributions and donate those to one of the badass Appalachian organizations or networks that's on the ground doing solid work for our neighbors in mutual aid, reproductive care, abortion access, community organizing, or anything else. In addition to letting y'all know that final amount, once I have time to sit down and crunch numbers and that fun stuff, in either episode 11 or 12, I'll be announcing our very first giveaway to celebrate 10 episodes and 1,000 Instagram followers. As of recording this intro on Monday evening before publishing this tomorrow, we are about 19 followers shy of 1,000. So you'll have to stay tuned for more information on that giveaway. And in the meantime, we do have a little treat for you. It's the trivia question of the day.
Hey, Chelsea.
Howdy, Chris.
So today you were talking a lot about bluegrass music, so I figured it would be a great trivia question. Where did the term bluegrass music originate from?
Ooh, this is a good question. I bet there's some folks out there who know the answer. I am not one of them, so I'm excited to find out. But I am just like everybody else out there, and we are all going to have to stick around to the end of the episode to hear the answer to today's trivia question. And with that being said, let's get this show on the road, shall we, my friends? You were like suggested as someone that I should interview. So I was really excited to like just be able to learn all about who you are and like what you do. And just if it's helpful for you, like the context of the podcast is like all about breaking myths and stereotypes about Appalachia. So there's like, I'm trying to every other episode, I like switch between doing like historical stuff that actually like talks about how our history, like so many other pieces of American history, have been totally whitewashed for the benefit of like oligarchs, capitalism, politicians. But then in between those episodes, I'm just trying to interview folks who live in Appalachia, are from Appalachia, who hold varying identities and who can like share their truth. And also if they do different types of work, then like uplifting their work in that process too. And so, yeah, just really excited to like get to know you. And I guess a good place to start would be like, could you tell me a little bit about who you are and like your connection to Appalachia and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So my name is Clover-Lynn. If you are okay with it, I don't really like to give my last name out over the internet due to,
of course,
weird stuff that has happened on TikTok. So I don't want to get like, weird cyber stalked because I've had some weird things happen.
And doxing is super real. So absolutely want to protect you and whatever that means for you.
Absolutely. So I'm from originally Boones Mill, Virginia, which is about 35 minutes south of Roanoke, about 35 minutes north of Western Carolina. So,
okay.
Actually, I guess it's probably like 45 minutes north of Carolina, but still. So like right there on kind of the eastern border of Southwest Virginia. Some very interesting stuff about Franklin County, which is the county that I'm part of. It is one of the, I think, 6 or 7 counties that were originally supposed to be part of the ARC that were not included due to private interests in the region, not wanting to be associated with the region for tourism. Oh, God, it got super. 1 second, let me see. Why did that get super? The exposure here is so weird. 1 second, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I know the sun can like dip behind one mountain and then it just like throws the whole lighting off. So,
Okay, let's see. We're gonna go back to like.
and if I mute myself, by the way, it's only because the toddler in the other room might start getting loud, and that's why.
That's fun. I grew up with like so many children around. So like I was the oldest of five. So like, and then we had other cousins living with us. So it was just like I'm so used to kids that it's not even like a thing. Um, but yeah, so it was one of those things where, the Shenandoah Valley and the Roanoke Valley were originally, so if you look at older maps of Appalachia, or before it was even really called Appalachia, it was called the Southern Highlands. If you're familiar with that kind of era of like early Appalachia, which I've been getting super into recently. And like Franklin County was always there. It's always been a part of it. Cecil Sharp came here. We have so many fiddle tunes and so much traditional music has come out of Franklin County. But when it came to the ARC being formed, it was like, oh, well, we don't want that to be there. And it was a lot of the reason for Franklin County specifically. I think Roanoke too, but Franklin County and Bedford County, a lot more, I think Franklin County, but Bedford, I think is included in this as well, is that there's a lake that was being, or two lakes being made at the time. And one of them was Smith Mountain Lake, which you might have heard of in the past. And that was like this big tourism like push for the area. So it was like, it didn't want to be associated with, the western side of the state. It was like, so it's kind of gone back and forth. Some people consider Franklin County Appalachia, some people don't. It's one of those things, most people who do consider it are people who don't go by ARC standards and don't say like, because a lot of people think when they think of Appalachia, they think of poverty. And like, as we both know, that's just a stereotype. And it's not to say that like, even in Franklin County, we have like some very impoverished, like a lot of poverty in certain areas, as well as like, we have a lot of gentrification and suburban sprawl happening in Franklin County. So in Franklin County, you have from the northwest, you have, or I guess the due north / slightly northwest, you've got Roanoke County and Roanoke City, and its suburban sprawl is pushing into Boone's Mill, which is my hometown. And then you've got the lake, which is causing gentrification and pushing down through Wirtz all the way down to Rocky Mount. So the only places really left that like people are like can really afford to live at this point are parts of Rocky Mount, Henry, which is almost in Henry County, which is an Appalachian county, Patrick County, which it's really funny. Franklin County is surrounded on three sides by Appalachian counties and on all sides by mountains. So you cannot leave Franklin County without passing through, over, or near a mountain. And the only way you can really come in and not pass a mountain at all is Hales Ford Bridge, which is at the lake area. And the reason that bridge is there is because that used to be a really pretty valley and they filled up that whole valley. And it's one of the deepest lakes. I think it's the deepest lake in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, or the deepest man-made lake at 200 or it's like 275, 300 feet in depth.
Wow. Was there like any, I know the reason I'm asking this is because a couple of the man-made lakes out here in the western part of Carolina where I live, literally the valleys had like communities in them before they were flooded. Was that the same situation in that lake?
Yeah, and that's a super personal experience to me too, because my papa's side, the land had already been purchased by the private investors before Papa was born. And I'm trying to learn more about this, but if you look at the original founders of Franklin County and you look at right where the area is, one of my like great grandfathers or whatever was right there where the lake is now. And, that's like a really like complicated thing because you're like, oh, like, how did you get that land in the first place? But also like, and then I don't know, there's a lot of very interesting stuff with that side of the family I'm trying to figure out. Oh my God. Okay. Well, it's like it keeps like going in and I'm just gonna leave it dark for now. It's just dark.
That's fine. I don't even have to post the video footage if you don't want me to. We can just do audio. So
either way, like I'm fine with it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean there's so many layers and it is so deeply personal and it's so complex, but like the idea that like our history, and then what you're saying about like the fact that you're trying to learn about this, it's so hard to learn about our history too, because like not only was it physically in a lot of places like this removed, and that's like something that I think we share like in common with our comrades of color and like indigenous folks. But then also it was like removed from history books too, a lot of times. And like literally like records of this kind of stuff is so hard to track. And I was actually talking to someone else yesterday who is an indigenous Appalachian, and she's like trying to find, her grandmother was like fully Native American, but she just like the paper trail was purposefully destroyed. And so it's so hard for her to like find any kind of legitimate tracing of like her heritage and her ancestry and that kind of stuff. So that's so common.
Absolutely. Like, and it's even weirder because like a guy wrote an entire book about Smith Mountain Lake, or he did a lot of like research and stuff. And I was like, so like, do you see anything about like, and then I said my last name, and he was like, no, I haven't seen anything about that family. And I was like, and then I've gone to the Franklin County Historical Society and I've been, hey, do you know anything about the X family? And they're like, no, not really. And I'm like, but we've been here, like we're on that map, like, and I can trace back, Papa's dad's dad to this guy. Where are all these records? Where's like the marriage record? There's like one marriage record from back then, a couple birth certificates, and that's it. And it's also really weird. I found out Papa was talking the other day. His dad's side was not allowed to be buried in a certain cemetery. So like, and I don't know what that's about. And like, we have a Scottish last name. So I don't think like there's any like person of colorhood coming from that. But I don't know why is it that like they were considered founders of Franklin County with it like on the map, but that when it came to like burials and stuff, like nothing's there. And it's just, there's a lot of really weird stuff. And I don't know how to like dig deeper.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's almost like you need some oral historian who like has, like the local storyteller, whoever has the stories, like they're going to be the ones who hold the key to like that piece of history.
Absolutely.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So, thanks for giving us like that little bit of your history. I would love to know kind of like more about who you are today and like the Appalachian that sits across the screen from me.
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, my name is Clover-Lynn. I am a traditional and bluegrass musician, as well as a semi-famous TikToker at this point. So,
Love that.
Which is probably why that's usually when people know about me, it's through TikTok. So that's probably where they kind of came to you from. Do you have a TikTok account or?
Yeah, we should definitely connect.
Okay.
I have definitely not even achieved like semi-celebrity. I think my personal has like 4K followers, and then I'm still working on the Rednecks Rising account. But the second episode I did was an interview with someone that I actually met via TikTok because I like fell into the rabbit hole of like Appalachian leftist TikTok. And we like became really good friends. And she's like basically what I would call like a micro influencer on TikTok, where it's like a good number of followers. And she's just got such a platform, and that's kind of like her main, how she's known too. So we definitely should link up. There's quite the community over there.
Absolutely. Who was it by chance?
So it's Hey Zoo is her username. She's from the southwestern mountains of Virginia, and she helps with like a free store effort out there. And she's super cool.
Pulaski County, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. That's 3 counties over for me.
Oh my gosh.
My partner is literally in the process of moving in with their sister in Pulaski County. It's like a 45-minute. I guess if you're taking the pretty way, it's like an hour drive. So,
yeah. Oh, I love the small world of Appalachia. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you are semi-famous TikToker and you're a bluegrass musician.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's fantastic. And like, what like moved you into making bluegrass?
Absolutely. I guess we should probably start way before the bluegrass came in.
I love a good history story.
Yeah. We should probably start with that I am a trans woman, and the fact that I came out to my family about, it was, I think it's about 7 years ago now. Um, and my father was it still is a deeply Christian man. Um, and he was not having it. And he kicked me out.
Mm.
And I bounced around the country a little bit. Um, Ended up in a place I'd prefer not to talk about right now, but a place pretty far from home, um, very flat, no mountains around, and I was there, and I made some friends and stuff, and everything was great. And while there, I thought I was suppressing my accent. I really did. I was like, and I would still like, I'd say North Carolina or something. I'd have like a long I or strong I or something like that. Or, so I couldn't say, we had this friend and her name was Win. And I was like, oh, it's so funny. Like, cause like I said win-win, and cause I was like, win does something. And I was like, oh, it's like the same word. And everyone's like, those are two different words. And I was like, win and win are the same word. And they're like, it's win and win. And I was like, that is the same word.
I don't hear a difference.
It comes out of that whole pen and pen thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's why, the old folks always say, can you hand me an ink pen? Because it's like, we gotta specify, because, it could be a safety pen or something. So,
Yep.
but I think it was that thing. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no. You didn't. I was going to say for me, it's heel and hill. Like anytime I'm trying to say just over the hill, like if I'm not thinking about it, it comes out as heel, like the heel of your foot. Like that's the big one for me.
I hear that one a lot too. And then I'll say, I'm trying to think. It's weird when you start trying to think about your accent, it's hard to like analyze it, because then you start like being like, well, does it sound like this? Does it sound like this? Am I doing this little thing? Am I doing? And then like, little tangent slightly. I'm from a foothill county, so it's like I've got really weird like Piedmontisms to my accent, but I've also got like traditional Blue Ridgean, like Appalachian, because I try to dissect accents a lot, and I've noticed there's some very interesting difference between like the Blue Ridge Plateau and then like Blue Ridge Highland area, so like Grayson County, Carroll County, and then you've got like traditional, like not traditional, but like what is more often thought of as an Appalachian accent with like East Kentucky and like the Plateau accent, as well as like parts of southern West Virginia, as well as like so I have like weird Piedmontisms that will slip through. Like sometimes when I'm saying, I'll like soften my R's a little bit, like I'll say Charlotte or something like that. But like a lot of my other stuff, a really really cool thing that my granny and my papa say is so like in like with the Piedmont accent, they drop that R a lot. They'll say call. They'll say call, but then like they'll say call wash. They'll put the R inside of wash, but they'll take the R off of car. So they call. So it's really interesting. Like
that is so interesting. And I was going to ask, but you just explained it. Like, what are the Piedmontisms that make it different? But that is very different, because here it's like definitely a hard R, right? Like, it's like, we need to go down to the car wash. And like, it's like, there's an emphasis on that, like hard R. And I don't know. I think ours in Western North Carolina probably gets into like touching on like the deep South accent meets the like Highlands accent. And like, there's probably some overlaps there. And I'm really into language, but not nearly as much into dialect. So I love that you're like able to dissect those differences to such a detailed degree.
It mostly came up because this all started when one of my friends, Nick, who you might actually know. Do you remember, God, late 2016, Nick Smith got very popular from Southwest Virginia. He was working with Fight for 15, and like the Young Turks interviewed him and stuff. And it was like, do you think this Cole County Republican Trump supporter or whatever, even though he was not a Trump supporter at all. And he was just this big, redneck, like super sweetheart, like was just talking about like, organizing and stuff, and people like classified him a certain way because he had that Cole County accent. And so we became really good friends. And I've like noticed some of the things that we've like rubbed off each other a little bit when it comes to our accents, because I had like, that foothill accent, and then he had like a plateau, like a Appalachian plateau accent, and we kind of like swapped some stuff. And I've noticed that, like, I'm trying to think of something. So something that like when we hang out, my eyes change a little bit. So I'll say like TikTok, and then he'll say TikTok. He puts that really sharp eye there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so sorry. I should not be drinking this much Dr. Pepper during this.
No, no, I'm just got my mason jar of wine, so it's fine. No judgment from me. Me and my partner were just talking about code switching for Appalachians the other day, because like my partner did not go to school after high school, but I ended up getting like a higher education. That was something that was like really strongly no one else in my family had gotten one, but they really emphasized that was like my path out of poverty, was like going to college, right? They're like, oh, you don't have to struggle the same way that we've struggled. And because of college, even though I stayed at the local university, WCU, which is like in my hometown, I didn't leave. There's other people who come to the university, whether it's like from all over North Carolina, all the way to the Outer Banks, but also like all over the continent, and then even like foreign exchange students. And so I ended up code switching a lot, just purely by like feeling that like internalized shame of like, oh, I don't want to sound like poor. Like, I don't want people to judge me, like all of this stuff. And so like, we were just talking about the other day, like how that code switching shows up, and like how it's like, I don't even realize I'm doing it most of the time these days. Yeah. And like, like the thickest my accent gets is when I'm like heated or drunk or both. And it's just like, there's no code switching, because it's just like, I'm just like coming from a place of emotion. But yeah, I think that's just so interesting, like what you're talking about, like with you and your friend and the differences, but also like the reason we code switch is because of like exactly what those folks were doing to your friend in that moment. Like the stereotyping, the like shaming, the blaming, the like scapegoating of everything just because of how we sound or how we look or where we live.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So you started this story because you were,
sorry.
No, I've got ADHD. So I'm like, if I recap, it's because I'm like, okay, what's happening here? So because you were telling me how you got into bluegrass. So we're a few years ago, you came out to your family 7 years ago, which also like, I just want to like pause there and just be like, thank you for sharing that, because I think that part of the picture that is painted about Appalachia is that we are all like backwoods, traditional Christian, like cis het, poor white trash. And like, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, we are queer, we are trans, we are people of color. We have phenomenal, rich Latinx neighborhoods where I live. Like, and so I know like that must have been traumatic, because I know my own experiences with coming out about different identities that I hold to my family and how that traumatized me. But also just like, thank you for naming that was something that you went through, and the way that it impacted you and your family kicking you out. Like, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And thank you for naming that truth in this space too.
Of course, no problem. I think we'll get back to that too. So I was in this new place. I'd made friends. I was still like, people were like making fun of my accent. I'd put on like the most milquetoast like folk music, and people were like, wow, you listen to that? Like, I put on like, I want to say it's like the Avett Brothers or Old Crow Medicine,
like Americana. Yeah.
Just generic, like, like Old Crow has some good stuff and then has bad stuff, but like it was like super generic, like maybe mildly Appalachian influenced folk music, slightly, that kind of thing. And people are like, you listen to that? And I was like, I mean, like, yeah, it's good music. And then like it got to the point where I was like, well, people are going to make fun of me for that. I'm just going to go back and listen to the Stanley Brothers, because like that's the music I grew up with. And people always being like, or my internally at the time always being like, I hate this stuff, it's so stupid. And I can get back into some of that and how I felt about like internalized how I feel about Appalachia growing up, and how that relates to a trans identity. And like we can definitely go back to that in a second once we kind of like finish up the story. But it got to the point where like I was in this place, and one of the people there, I was, friends with her. She bought a banjo, and she was like, "I'm gonna learn to play." I was like, "That's so cool!" Like, everyone plays back home, like, and then back home we have. I know West Carolina has a very similar thing. In Virginia, we have the Crooked Road, which is Virginia's Heritage Music Trail, which starts in my county and goes all the way to Dickinson County, if I'm not mistaken. I think it goes all the way up to the most northwest part of Southwest Virginia, which is Dickinson County, and it goes through all that. And it's just like this cultural like, heritage music trail. It's really cool, and so just the banjo like felt very special to me for that reason. I'd always seen it growing up, always saw all these things, and then she gets it. And she learns like she doesn't like take any lessons or anything. She just like learns to play it like with the pick and stuff, and like if you want to be traditional, that's cool. And like, I'm a traditional person, but like, I'm not going to stop someone from playing something a certain way. But I was just like, well, that's not really what it sounds like back home. But, I guess it's not my place to, limit how you play your music. But I was like, but what is it? So like, I got like really like interested, and also like, I don't know if competitive is the right word, but I was like, maybe like I could, I'm really homesick. Like what? Would I want to even learn an instrument? Because I'd never learned an instrument before. And so I was like, yeah. So I was actually at home visiting some family for Thanksgiving, and went to a local music shop, which is still one of the best music shops I've ever been to this day. It's called Franklin Music. I'm going to plug them every chance I get because they're incredible, and they will do anything for you. But I go there and I don't have enough money for banjo really, but the guy's like, well, I'll work with you. And then he gives me like a pretty cheap banjo with a resonator. It's really nice. Probably cost like $300 or $400. He gave it for about 200. Super sweetheart. And I took that back with me. And I just started learning. And so I just got into bluegrass music that way. Because it's something I'd always grown up with, and it made me feel close to home. So
Oh my gosh. And that must have been what, like 4 or 5 years ago, something like that?
no, that was actually I'm about 2.5 years now playing banjo. So
Oh my gosh. So I haven't heard you play yet, but you identified yourself as a bluegrass musician. So I imagine that this means that this is something that you're doing like pretty much full time at this point.
I would not say full time. I had another full-time job. I lost my job last week, but it is like my main passion, as well as like something that's what I'm famous for on TikTok. So did you ever see the video of any of the videos of someone covering like bigots with banjos, or
I don't know if I have, but now I'm definitely going to go look for it right after this.
there was one, you remember when the alternative became like a big deal?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember the video where the guy was like, I've got two types of women, like, or I like two types of women, goth women and Southern women. And he's like the alternative. And then someone stitched him and got in the back of the truck and played banjo in the back of the truck.
Okay. I don't know if I saw the back of the truck video, but I remember the trend coming to life.
So that was like my first big like explosion of the scene. I think it got like 1 million views or something.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. LaCroix does this to me every time, but I'm like, I'm just gonna keep working.
I do the same. I'm like, I'll chug one too, and I'll just be like, ugh.
Like we're sitting here doing an interview that's gonna be like broadcast to people, and I'm like, well, I'm just gonna burp the entire time, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of how that started. And so now I do like things like that, as well as I'm starting a couple other things. I do a banjo buying program because a lot of people like they'll go to Guitar Center or something, and the banjos there just are not good, and there's no one there to set them up. So I've started a program where I go to my local shop, I talk to him about someone's needs, and then we get it out to them where they're shipping, or I drive it to them. I think the farthest I've driven delivering one of these is Shelby, North Carolina. So
that's very close to me.
Yeah,
very close.
Over in Cleveland County.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Okay. I love like what a way to invest in your culture and giving more people access to their culture.
Yeah.
I'm like, honestly, like this is the weird side of me, but I'm just like tearing up even thinking about it. I know that seems silly, but I'm just like, that's like when I think of, so I love to sing, but I played like the flute in middle school, like, and I've never had any musical talent beyond singing. Like I tried to learn guitar once, more than once, and just sucked at it. But when I think about like the banjo and like string instruments in particular, like all string instruments, honestly, banjo, fiddle, like guitar, like I just see like my uncle, like faces come to my mind of, and like memories of like, you know how like when you smell a certain smell and like a specific memory will like come to life for you. Like that's what happens for me when I think about the banjo, and I think about these like family gatherings that we've had where we were all like jamming out and my uncles are playing. And I just love, like, that's just such a powerful way to give access to that to folks. And I love that you do that.
Yeah, of course. Like it's something that I want to do more. I think since I've lost my job, I've been focusing more on cultural stuff. So it's been like a blessing in disguise. I have my first real gig, real gig, in Nashville in a month, or not a month. It's a week. It's a week.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. That is such a big deal.
Yeah, it's a sit-in gig, so it's not like it's just me or anything. It's me with a bunch of people, but it's an incredible opportunity. And I kind of took it as like a sign from God. I was like, well, like if I just lost my job and I've got a gig in Nashville, and this was like at that time, it'd be about 3 weeks. I was like, if I've got a gig in 3 weeks and I just lost my job, this is maybe God telling me, work on this. Like go learn the songs you need to learn, and then like play them well, and then go back to job hunting. So
yes. Oh my gosh. And like, do you have pages up where folks can support you in your musical endeavors, like Patreon, anything like that?
not yet. I think I'm going to start trying to do that kind of thing. I felt really weird doing that kind of thing while I had a full-time job. So my day job is being an engineer. So I feel really weird on most cases taking money if I've already got like a good paying job. There are exceptions like around my birthday and stuff like that, where if like people want to support my TikTok or something, they send me money. Or if like we had a couple surprise bills or something come out, I'll be like reaching out to like, the TikTok community and be like, hey, if y'all want to like support. But overall, I don't feel like great taking money every month when I had a full-time job. But now I'm like, well, maybe I could make this my full-time job and not have to go back to the tech industry, because that was awful. And I hated every second of it.
And you like deserve, so there are multiple truths that are coming out of this conversation, which is one, you deserve for your bills to be paid and for you to not have to stress about how to survive under capitalism. And then two, like, I think there are probably folks out there who want to support making that possible. And like, there are, so just you didn't ask for advice, but here's my unsolicited advice. Like for the podcast, for example, it was like something that I was like, this is my passion. Like I love telling stories and I love like learning and sharing what I'm learning with folks. And if I can do that in a way that like busts these myths about Appalachia and makes it more possible for us to start building power with our people across race lines, with other folks, and then like I want to do that. And I do still work a full-time day job. I make a salary, which is like, I am definitely not wealthy or even really middle class. Like I wouldn't describe it that I'm the primary provider for my family, but I don't necessarily intend to ever make money off of the podcast, but I did go ahead and start a Ko-Fi, which is kind of like a Patreon. And the point was like making a podcast like costs money. Right. And like, it's like, I have to pay for the like publishing platform stuff, like the equipment, even like I wouldn't own this microphone if it weren't for the podcast. And then like, and some other stuff. And same thing with making music and like going to shows, like the travel to that gig is like that costs money, et cetera. And so to like give people the opportunity to invest in your art so that you can make more of it, I think is even without considering it necessarily like a full-time job, just like letting people have the opportunity to contribute to making your art more accessible and the work that you do more accessible. Because I think sometimes like capitalism does such a good job at making us believe that like we either don't deserve something or like we shouldn't ask for something because other people need it more. And like, I'm always like, would some like mediocre cishet white dude with access to money feel the same reservation around starting a monthly subscription that you feel, So, Yeah, I that was a tangent, and I'm sorry I went off on that rant,
Like,
but
yeah, I'll probably do something like that soon. But yeah, also back to your point, I think something that's really interesting you brought up is like you have a good job now, but you wouldn't even consider yourself middle class. Is like I've been doing like a lot of like thinking on that. So like my grandparents were sharecroppers. That was
Mhm.
like I come from like a long line of sharecroppers, and so like money has not been a thing. Like I would never say we were poor. Other people might say that, but I'd never say that because Granny would probably hit me. But you know how that is. Like it's one of those things where like
There's
you
so much
know,
shame around
right,
identifying as poor. Yeah.
right. And so I've noticed something. So like I had a really good job. I was an engineer. I was making like really good money, at least what I thought was really good money. When I learned what other people were making, I was like, well, okay, well, I guess it's not as good as I thought, but I thought
Mhm.
it was really good money. But I realized that like even the people who were making the same amount in the company came from backgrounds that had much more access to wealth. So like even the some people who made like slightly less than me, or even quite a bit less than me, if they had like a less technical job or they had a job that was like more entry level or something, when they came from money, their, say their salary was even like half of mine. Like if their salary was half of mine, it seemed to go farther. And maybe I'm just that
Mhm.
bad with money, but at the same time, when you struggle and you see people around you, like, you know, like, and this goes back to the when I was homeless thing. I was homeless, and then like I got back on my feet and stuff in this new place. I got a pretty decent job. I was making $18 an hour there, like pretty solid. It was a bigger city, so it wasn't incredible, but it was also enough that like I felt a little more stable. And then even at that time, I was not on speaking terms with my dad. I was on speaking terms with my mom, and I was still like sending money back home on occasion because like they needed a water bill paid, they needed help with the phone, and the same like that same um help like also extended towards me. Like say if I was behind on a bill, despite already of kicking me out, that money still flowed both ways because like that was just what you did. So
Mhm. Exactly. It's like being poor costs so much money that like even when you do finally get like a decent job with salary and like benefits offered, like you're still paying off the cost of being poor. Like the part of the reason I'm like I've had jobs with salary since basically on and off since 2016, not consistently, but like that's how long I've since my first salary job. And I remember that salary was $33,000 a year. I was like, this is amazing. This is so great. I'm making more than the 14K I was making waitressing. This is wonderful. And it's still just like, first off, like that is still poverty. You are still not making decent wages. But then also like when you are paying rent instead of a mortgage and your rent is more than what the mortgage would be for the same type of place and you're not building that equity, so it's like you're not accumulating wealth. And then also like, oh, you've been poor, so the only car you've ever had is this lemon clunker. Well, having a lemon clunker and maintaining that shit costs a ton of money because you're constantly fixing something. So even once you get that salary job, like you're still paying to fix that car because you haven't been able to like get credit score enough to be able to purchase a new car, because credit is also something that's like really mostly attainable via pre-existing wealth. And then it's like if your parents can't afford to support you while you go to school, then you're working while you go to school, which means that like all of this other stuff, it's just like it's constantly building. So yeah, exactly. It's like I do make a salary now. It's a decent salary, especially for a family of three, but like I don't consider myself middle class. I rent an apartment, and if I were to lose my job tomorrow, like my family would be home, like we would be fucked. We would be homeless. And that's like for me, that's the difference between like middle class and like poor is like, okay, if you could survive even 1 month being unemployed, like I wouldn't say that makes you middle class, but really like that for me is the distinguishing factor between like
yeah.
lower middle class and like being poor.
Mhm. That's I'm on that month right now, and I'm like I really hope unemployment kicks in really really soon because like
Yes.
I'm getting a roommate next month now. I guess in like 2 weeks now, actually, because like I was like planning on renting this place by myself, and now like I'm like I can't do that anymore. And it's like it's rent has gone up so much in my county. Like I'm living in like a place that like up until very recently probably would have been $400 or $500 a month, and it jumped up to about 850 this year, last
Mm.
year, something. And so,
When you were describing like the toxic combination of like gentrification and then on the other side, the like tourism
mhm.
industry like coming together, that's exactly what's happening where I live because we've got Asheville, which is gentrification city, literally.
Mhm.
And then we've got like we're in the Appalachian Trail and like North Georgia is like just on the other side. And so it's like those two are coming together. And so where I live, it's the same thing. It's like single wide trailers that were manufactured 50 years ago, but that we shouldn't honestly even be paying rent to live in. Like people are charging close to $1,000 a month for them. And it's like, what are you even? But it's because we have like 1% or less vacancy in this area because it's such a hot area that everyone wants to be in. And someone with way more money than any of our local folks has is willing to pay for that single wide trailer so that they can get rid of it and replace it with something that they actually want to live in. And like give that whoever owns it like that much more money for it. And so, yeah, it's like the cost of housing for folks in Appalachia, especially local folks who
Mhm.
are just trying to stay where they came from and give back to where they came from. Like it's impossible.
Yep. That's so right now there's a boutique hotel being built in my county right now. And like it could very easily be 12 apartments, um, or like 10 apartments or something like that, which could be used for like local people who don't want to move out. Like, and I live in like one of the biggest counties in Southwest Virginia. I think it's considered the biggest Southwest Virginia county. And it's just, there's, yeah, I don't know what else to say about it at that point. It's just, I don't know what to do. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. What do you do when you like can't even say anything to criticize stuff because it's just like, just look, it criticizes itself. It's like, oh man. Um, and like, can you tell me? I would love to know just like what, since starting your journey in bluegrass like 2.5 years ago,
Yeah.
like, first of all, just on a personal curiosity, I'm sure the listeners are like, why are you asking this question? But like, how long did it take for you to learn the banjo and feel like good and comfortable playing for other people? Because selfishly, I might try to learn now.
On a real, just between us, just kidding, you can put this in. I still don't.
Yeah.
I still like, I can pick it up and I can like, roll through chords. I can like kind of pick out a melody a little bit, kind of. That's kind of what I'm working on right now. I can, read tab and like learn something and like memorize a song. I can do all that. And yet I still don't feel like a good musician because I started so much later than a lot of other people that like, it's just like I feel kind of like so like behind. And there's also like another thing there is bluegrass is also becoming like me and my partner were actually talking about this last night. We're listening to an interview with a banjo player, and there's nothing against this guy whatsoever, because like he's an excellent player, super sweet guy. He lives in the mountains in Denver, Colorado, and I'm sure you know how expensive that is. He plays for a really good band, like all this stuff, whatever. But then like the way he talks about bluegrass is it's like he talks about it and the way he plays. And I'm trying to say this without being mean because I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be rude to this guy. It's gotten so far away from Appalachia. It's gotten so far away from the South. It's like it's become. I don't know if gentrified is the right word. I don't know if whitewashed is the right word. I don't know if I'm using any of the correct terminology, but it feels like there's just like a lot of weird stuff. It's like people aren't just like playing the melody anymore. They're not just like playing the songs. They're like they're treating it. I'm sorry. I wish I could be like a better like explainer of this, but it's just this thing that really bothered me and my partner last night. We were driving back. There's some of their stuff was in Richmond, and they're driving it to Pulaski, and we were just driving back listening to this interview, and it just like just little things here and there that like kind of like bugged both of us a little bit, and so it's just like I don't know. It's very okay. I guess the best way to put it is there's a really good banjo player named Joe Troop. Have you ever heard of him? Yeah, Joe Troop, Appalachia. I love Joe. He talks about bluegrass, and he talks about one of his biggest problems with modern bluegrass, especially within the scene, is it's very masturbatory. It's very like, look how good I am at my instrument. Look how good like I can play this. Look at how like complicated and technical this is. But there's no soul anymore. And I'm not saying there's never no soul, because I think there are plenty of players who do like really intricate and complicated things, but still do a lot of soul with it. And I think if you're going to look at someone who's really complicated and still puts a lot of like good feeling into it, is Noam Kelly. I think if you listen to the Punch Brothers, Numba Kelly, it still feels bluegrassy. It still feels like kind of old time. It still sounds like a banjo. It doesn't sound like you're trying to play jazz. And I don't have anything against jazz, because like I think jazz is an incredible art form that has kind of been taken over by white men, but not my place to comment on that whatsoever. But it's just like, I don't know. I have an opinion about bluegrass is when you're playing bluegrass, play the melody, play the chord progression, just play the feeling of the song. It doesn't have to be super technical. And I think this goes back into something that I believe about music and bluegrass and being a banjo player. Being really good is overrated. Being really technically proficient is overrated. Honestly, it is way more worth it to just have fun playing it, obviously, but just like the artistic expression, the feeling that you get when you're playing. If you're playing something and you're like, this is too hard to play, I don't really like, I'm not having fun, and not in like you practice, and obviously that's not always the most fun thing, but like, sorry, if you're just like not enjoying it, I don't know. I really wish I'd thought about this a little bit more. I guess I said we're talking more about trans stuff, and then we got into the banjo stuff, and I like had not prepared for any of those type of things.
No,
and
you're
so,
fine.
Yeah, it just kind of like comes down to the fact of I don't know where I was going with that. It's just like
No, I think what I appreciate what you were saying about like how, and I mean, it kind of touches back on like, I was talking to someone else on Instagram, but also in a previous episode about like how redneck became chic when it was like it was like profitable all of a sudden, and like people could like be cool doing it. And I think that like that's one thing that you were touching on, but then but like also when that happens specifically with like bluegrass, it's like it becomes so performative and like transactional that it's like it loses that transformative, like almost spiritual connection that's like the full humanity and like the story that the music is telling, as opposed to like just the act of like playing the music. And I think that that's like, for me, that was really clear. I think for other folks, it'll be really clear too. Cause like, that's how it is for me too. And it's like, it's hard for me to explain why I like bluegrass, but it's like, I remember square dances in my grandma's neighborhood when I was little. And like, it does feel like there's a depth to the music that is lacking in a ton of like poppy, like modern contemporary stuff. And so that it makes so much sense to me. And yeah.
As long as you got it, that's if you understood what I was saying, other people would too. So that's good with me.
100%. And I guess since you were more prepared to talk about sort of like the trans piece and being Appalachian, like would love to just hear sort of like what you're holding around, your thoughts and reflections around how that growing up in Appalachia and that like internalized shame and all of that combined into your trans identity, and if there's any overlaps with bluegrass music and like a way that has also potentially been an outlet for you and any of that stuff.
Absolutely. Do you mind if we take a quick break real quick? I chugged a bunch of quids and I'm going
to get more wine. So that sounds great. Okay. Be right back.
Hello. I also got more drinks, so
Yay.
I'll take another break in like 30 minutes. Yeah,
no problem. Hopefully, like I want to be respectful of your time too, so hopefully I won't keep you that long. because I know we've been together almost an hour. So,
okay. Well, also, I know there's been a lot of like diverging and stuff. So I'm sure you're gonna have to like cut stuff and like put it together in like nicer, like.
I think all of the rabbit holes were the perfect rabbit holes. I always, at the end of every episode, I end up apologizing because I'm like, I'm really sorry. I have ADHD. So I know that there were quite a few side trails and detours we went on, but that happens. So I think it'll fit in great, but I'll definitely edit it to make sure that you sound as wonderful as you want to sound. So
I appreciate it. And also don't worry about my time. I am unemployed and have nothing going on. So this is the highlight of my day. I was like, I get to do an interview today.
Yay!
So
I'm so glad that we were able to finally sit down together. And for our paths to cross, I'm only 7 episodes have gone live so far. And I really wanted to include voices of like communities that aren't typically included. So like Indigenous folks, folks of color, trans folks, other folks from the queer community. And so I was like finding out now that you are a part of the trans community is like, yes, this is very serendipitous. And I'm so glad that our paths crossed because like Appalachians whose stories and truths get erased from both history and like modern day existence are like exactly the folks that like I want to use this platform to lift up.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess I can kind of like go into a lot of like trans Appalachianness. I've got a couple stories I've told on TikTok that, kind of talk about what it's like being trans in Appalachia, and I can like share those. I can also share new experiences, and I can kind of just share like an overall feeling of like being trans in Appalachia is one of the most incredible things ever. And like I know there are people, and I have to come at this from a certain angle. I have to understand I am a white trans woman in Appalachia. As far as I'm aware, because there's a weird thing with passing where I don't know whether I pass half the time. I get called ma'am and get confused. Like I get that, like I think I pass, and it's like this really weird, like, I've had people be very surprised. I've had people not act surprised, and I'm like, okay, did they clock me, or is it like they're trying not to be rude? Like, what is it? Why aren't they surprised? Why are these other people surprised? And so that's kind of like a whole other can of worms. I'm saying bag of worms, but like outside of all of that, being trans in Appalachia is so much different than being trans in a big city or in a little city outside of the region, or being, trans anywhere else that I've been trans. Being trans in Appalachia in the Blue Ridge is honestly incredible. I've received the type of support from the most surprising of people. I've received support from the most Trumpy of conservatives to the most left-leaning, like any, denomination of leftist thought that you can think of. And, and that gets into like Trumpism and stuff like that. And we can briefly touch on that because I feel like I'm probably not the most educated person on that that type of puppy, that type of like thought process, that kind of thing. But yeah, I can talk about any of that. I can talk about how being trans in a big city, I was harassed, not just because there were more people, but I was harassed more frequently and way worse than I've ever been in Southwest Virginia or Western Carolina, because I've been to Western Carolina quite a lot, actually. It's funny, you mentioned you went to WCU. I dated someone at WCU for a very brief period.
Oh my gosh, it truly is. Appalachia's the smallest of worlds. That's crazy.
But yeah, so I've been trans in Appalachia. I've been trans in, cities. I've been trans in New York City. I've been trans in Chicago. I've been, trans in a whole bunch of places, and there's nowhere like home. It's some of the most surprising things. So there's this country store, one county over, called the Floyd Country Store, which it's really cool. And they have like a lot of like music programs there, and there's a jam there. There's quite a few jams actually there. And I met this one guy. I'm not going to give out names or anything, but he is a very prevalent conservative in the local political community. And he's also a doctor or pharmacist. I can't remember which, but like he actually messaged me on Facebook afterwards. Like he was also a banjo player. We played. I feel like if I keep talking about this person, anyone who's from here is gonna be like, wait, what? But like, hopefully there isn't a whole lot of overlap between Southwest Virginia's conservative community and, this podcast. Like,
yeah, I doubt maybe they'll listen to it like 2 years. The goal would be for them to listen to it a couple of years down the road and be like totally radicalized by the content, but we'll see what happens.
But yeah, he like reached out to me. He's like, hey, he's like, I didn't like necessarily clock you or anything, but I saw your Facebook profile. I went through it a little bit, and like he's like, I found out kind of who you were. And it wasn't like in a creepy way. It was, I think he had his suspicions because he was a doctor, and he was like, if you ever need help accessing your pharmaceuticals or like anything like that, you reach out to me and I will help you. And it was like, here's a man who has like on multiple occasions like posted stuff about MAGA and like all of this stuff, still being incredibly like supportive of a trans woman. Like, and that's the type of thing that no one understands. No one from outside the region gets that. No one gets the fact that like even the people here that I've met on average, especially the older people, even when they don't understand it, they are still extremely loving and extremely kind in a way that even some of the most supportive people have never been.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's like that authentic, like, I may not get you, but I see you and I love you. Like, and that authenticity is like, it goes so much farther than like performance allyship.
Absolutely. I think there's a really good example of that. And that's my papa. That's my dad's dad, like I was talking about. He does not see me as a woman. He still sees me as, the boy that came out, 7-8 years ago, that kind of thing. I guess it's 7 years, not 8, but still, he sees me as that. He still calls me my dead name and he uses he pronouns. Same with my granny. And I don't care at this point. Like, I know that they love me, but he did this really funny thing. And I talked about this a little bit on TikTok, and I came over to his house one day and we were talking, and, I came in and I usually dress a little more modestly there. Like I'll wear like a jumpsuit or overalls or something, or like jeans and a t-shirt, something like I say overalls or a jumpsuit because usually when I'm going over there and like dressing more conservatively, it's because I'm going to help in the garden, because my papa's had a garden my entire life. And like before I was born, still continues to have one. So I always try to go help and stuff. And so, I get over there and I'll have some on. But this time I was like, just stopping by to say hi. And like, I was about to go, I think I was going to Richmond. I might've been going somewhere else. I might've been going out. I don't remember, but I was dressed very goth, very me. And he goes, now, Dedney, I don't care much that you dress like a girl, but please, in my house, do not dress like a hussy.
Yeah.
And so it was just like it was a sense of like, I don't want to say gender affirmation, but it was very like, it felt very caring. It felt very like, you be who you want to be, but please, like, don't dress,
but be respectful was basically what he was saying. Yeah,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that's such such a papaw thing to do. Oh my gosh.
And then the other day, actually, my great aunt passed away. I think she might be a cousin. I don't remember. She had a long fight, I think, with cancer. I don't fully remember, but she was incredible. She worked at the local middle school. She would always be there in the cafeteria when I was like eating as a younger kid. And, I have really fond memories of her. And I went over to the house after she passed away because my granny was over there. And I just want to come with condolences, as you do, and just talk and hang out with the family. And it was like all of the older women in my family were gathered around, like hanging out. And my cousin Donna, she's probably early 50s, late 40s, something like that. And I get out my truck, me and my partner start walking towards her. We knock, and Donna, Lauren comes and opens the door, and Lauren's like, I knew it was you, blah, blah. And then I was like, okay, interesting. It's a weird thing to say. And then Donna said, I was so confused when you came out the truck. I was like, who is that pretty girl getting out that truck? And then she was like, oh, and then said dead name. And I was like, well, I mean, it's a really weird, like, like it's a weird type of acceptance that, like, I don't think people from outside the region will ever understand. I mean, I'm sure, you know what, I will say, I've had one other conversation with a trans woman who understands, and she is not from Appalachia, but she's Black. And we have had conversations like this where we both like had these conversations of like family acceptance in such a weird way that like outside communities typically wouldn't understand. And we had this like really cool point of connection there where like I told that story and she's like, no, I totally get that. My like granddad is the same way. And it was like, there's just a lot of really cool things that I think being Appalachian trans, other people don't get. So.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for naming that like overlap with the other trans woman's like experience with her family, because it's so I don't actually think I've shared this story on the podcast yet, but I've been a community organizer for like 10 years now, ever since I became radicalized by basically losing my family to the for-profit healthcare system and like just starting to look at things. And one of the trainings that I was in was like a week-long training in Chicago. So we like went out there, stayed on campus, etc. And we had to do like these one-on-ones. We set a goal for ourselves with like how many folks we wanted to just sit down with and like share our story and hear their story and like learn how we could organize together was like one of the assignments. And there were a couple of folks at the training who one was a Black man, and then one was a man of color who did not identify as Black. He was his culture was different, but I'm like not remembering, so I don't want to misstate something. They both had been incarcerated. One of them had been supposed to be incarcerated for life since a child. Children couldn't get the death sentence, but there was like he had basically committed a crime of self-defense at like age of 14 and had been sentenced to life as a result. And then the other one had like grown up in the inner city and as a result been criminalized for being a person of color in the inner city and like all of the things that go down with that. And I remember like sharing my story of like growing up in Appalachia and being like, yeah, I live in the heart of like Trump land, like whatever that is, but also like my cousins were being killed by baby daddies over like drugs when the opioid crisis hit. And like, we were all like feeding each other and sleeping on each other's couches. And like, if one of us had a truck, that meant that was the truck that all of us were using because none of us had a vehicle. And I remember when one of those guys said to me, you could have grown up in the ghetto based on like what you're saying to me. And it was like that overlap between like, we have so much more in common, like with like poor white folks, especially Appalachia, I think is like this very unique subculture, but like poor white folks in Appalachia in particular have so much more in common with folks of color than we are led to believe. And the reason that folks in power don't want us to know that is because like when we recognize these overlaps and the similarities, we're like, oh, like the shared problem here is actually like you fuckers at the top. And so just, I really appreciate you like naming that overlap and like that unique, like that cultural acceptance that could be perceived as intolerance if not understood in the right context. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's so what of like part of my mission is like, I never ever want to invalidate or like demean the real violence and real suffering that folks are caused at the hands of white supremacy and capitalism, including our queer community, our community of color, a lot of folks. And at the same time, like part of my mission is like trying to draw attention to the fact that most of that violence is not actually committed by the people who are being blamed for that violence right now. Like I'll like go on. So my TikTok niche that's like gotten me a couple thousand followers is that like, I'll make statements that are like probably unpopular, but it's like poor rural white people aren't the problem. People in power are the problem. And like politicians are the problem. Like they are the ones who pitch these narratives and like the ones who keep us trapped in this. And folks who aren't from here, like you were saying, who probably have like never even visited here will make statements that are like, yeah, but they want me dead. or like because of like whatever. And it's like, actually, like, how do you like what? Like, that doesn't sound like any of the folks that I grew up with. And like, yes, it's hard and it's traumatizing to come out to like really religious, traditional, conservative folks. And the reaction, while it is violence to send your child to live on the streets, and I will say that as a parent, like that would be violence for me to do that to my child, regardless of the situation. Like there is like there's so much nuance. Like it's not just black and white. Like it's not just like these people want folks that are different dead. It's just like they don't know how to react in a way that is healthy. And then once they get comfortable or situated, then they can like express this like very confused sense of acceptance, like authentic sense of acceptance.
Absolutely. And that's kind of going back to like the acceptance thing. My dad is actually incredible now. Like it took a little bit, and I think it took a tragic event with a close friend of his for him. I don't know if this is the exact time, but we had a family friend who lost a child, and very tragically, and it shocked the community. And I think that's about the time that my dad was like, I might not always have this time with my child.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at that point he started using my name, my pronouns, and actually at that point I actually changed my name again because I wasn't entirely fit with the name. My entire family is in alphabetical order. It's Amy, Brian, my dead name, Delaney, Easton, Grayson, Houston. So, we had all that. And then so I changed my name to something that wasn't even like close to starting with the C. And then like as this like kind of sense of give and take, I was like, what if I change my name to something with the C so it fits back in that like that pattern that they really like. And so it came down to Clover, like chamomile. And I went with Clover because like I love a lot of songs that have like Clover in it. Like, I'm not gonna get into that one actually because that one goes into a story that is probably not entirely appropriate. But it's a very funny story involving one of my ex's names and my name, and it's like this whole thing. But it's really funny, but it's probably not the most like appropriate thing for this type of podcast. We can talk about it later or something if you'd like to, but it's like we'll
do a bonus episode. Just kidding. Only fan subscribers only. No.
But yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else I can talk about, like being like trans and Appalachian. I can talk about how, I guess this is something I told you we were working on. It's not entirely come to fruition yet, but me and my partner are working on a nonprofit for Southwest Virginia, Western Carolina, and parts of Southern West Virginia. We plan on moving it farther west as well soon, but it's just, we're trying to get local stuff set up and then eventually go through it. But it's going to be called Lavender Mountain. And it's going to be one part LGBTQ specified Appalachian podcast, as well as at first it's going to be like a pipeline of being able to get resources to trans people in Appalachia who may not have access to a local pharmacy or a doctor willing to prescribe certain medicines, as well as eventually what I want to be is a roving, like, how, I don't know if they have in West Carolina and Southwest Virginia, they have the medical vans that like the medicine vans and stuff.
We don't
like that.
really have those around here, but my like day job, my other life, I work with like the healthcare system. And so there's quite a few, like we call them mobile units. It's like, yeah.
So having something like that would go to, right now we're focused on the foothill communities, the New River, the Roanoke Valley, and Mount Rogers areas. That's kind of be our first start. And then pushing into West Carolina with some of their foothill communities, along with the high country, which is like right there, kind of like on that the north side of high country. I don't know as much about the West Carolina regions as I do the Virginia ones.
Yeah, I don't. So I'm like in southwestern North Carolina. It's like North Carolina has this like little like we've got like the top mountains, and then we go into this like point at the bottom down here, and I'm like in this little corner down here. But like I think the Virginia high country border, I feel like that's like Boone, like Watauga, the more like that type of stuff, which is they're also Appalachia. I love them. I just also have never really been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Appalachia is such like no matter what definition you're going by, it's still such a large place. Like if you're talking just geographic region, it's massive. You're talking about ARC boundaries, or if you even go like in a super narrow definition of only counties that were in the original maps 100 years ago, like, or not 100
it's
years
still
ago,
huge. It's like goes all the way into Canada. Like it's so huge.
so yeah, I can't blame you for, if it wasn't for dating that person, I would have never gone to the southwest part of Western Carolina, because I'd always been in the like, foothill going up to Boone, as well as like, almost getting to like the Tennessee, the North Tennessee border, like Bristol and stuff. But
that's pretty close to where I am. So I'm like a 10-minute drive from where 40 splits to go towards basically like Asheville or Tennessee. It's like you can either go towards Charlotte and stuff, or you can go west towards Tennessee. And so it's probably, I might be wrong, but I think it's close to about 25-minute drive to the Tennessee state line here. So Pigeon Forge is like, that's like we're just going to Gatlinburg for a good time around here, because we can take a day trip out there.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to think. Let's see. I feel like there's so much to being trans in Appalachia, from like, I don't, it's not even like I'm like glossing over the bad things, because a lot of the bad comes with the good. It's it's the fact that my dad kicked me out, but it's the fact that he has come so far, and he is a public school teacher. And sorry. Oh, sorry. The drink is so carbonated.
Good.
But even with like, so he's a public school teacher, and recently my county like discussed like trans bathroom stuff, and he was very like, he gave a very well rationed opinion, and like it was very like trans positive, as well as like at the same time. And keep in mind, this is the same father who kicked me out 6-7-ish years ago, and he critical race theory was brought up at the exact same time. I think you remember the time period I'm talking about, where it was like trans bathrooms, critical race theory, all at the same time. And like, this is my dad, who's in my mind always been fairly conservative, was like, yeah, I don't really see what the big deal about critical race theory anyway. It's just like a ploy from the Republicans. And I was like, and now my dad is also very politically apathetic. He is conservative when it comes to like family and being Christian, that kind of thing. He is not a super like, I think this past election, 2020, the 2020 election was like his like first time voting, at least as I'm aware. Cause I know him and mom has always had a thing. Mom's like, oh, you need to vote. And dad's like, yeah, whatever. I don't really care. And I don't know if that was like, he wasn't voting, or he just didn't care when he was voting. But like, I know he voted this past time, and he wouldn't tell me who he voted for. And my dad's very antagonistic. My dad and I are both very hard-headed and stubborn. We argue a lot. And I know for a fact, if he would have voted for Trump, and maybe he did, I don't know. If he would have voted for Trump, he would have told me to piss me off. Mm-hmm. Not because I support Joe Biden, but just because like, I don't really agree with any of it. And I think it was one of those things where like, he was like, yeah, I'm just not, he's like, I voted. And so maybe he didn't vote for president this year. I don't know. Or that year. I don't know. But it's one of those things. My dad is it feels very politically apathetic, with very interesting things coming from both sides.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like your dad's like a populist, basically. It's just like, he's like, yeah, I want mine and my people, my community, my family to be taken care of. And like everything else is like, not my business, not my circus, not my monkeys. And that honestly makes total sense. And it's just like, and that's how so many folks, like, I think the larger public does not understand that people in Appalachia, like, we just want to be left alone. And we also like, don't want our people to get fucked over. And whether that looks like people being treated with like basic fucking human dignity for the way that they identify, or whether it's like teaching rational curriculum in schools because that's what history is. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, we just want to be left alone and we don't want like to have to worry about all of your drama. And I think that that's where it's like folks who are so ride or die, like vote blue, no matter who, it's like, that's the problem. It's like, do you not see that like also there is capacity for the Democrats to fuck over people, and they have done it before and they will do it again. And they like benefit just as much from all of the divisive rhetoric that the Republicans benefit from, that it's like, honestly, sometimes Appalachians and like folks who are like populist are way ahead of the game as far as everything else is concerned.
Yep. I feel like there's something we can talk about like later, like on personal ground, because I don't want to like drag a lot of this into the public, but there's a very interesting family dynamic because my mom comes from the city. She comes from, it's Roanoke. So it's not like, a big city. It's still a city in Southwest Virginia, depending on who you ask. But most people consider it a city in Southwest Virginia. And her mom was born in Catawba. But then the family, her dad was from Norfolk, Virginia, and her mom was from Pennsylvania or something. And my mom has a lot of like, and same with my Nana has some, and they're not bad people or anything like that, but they have some stuff like that is very different than my dad's side, who seems more traditionally conservative on the outside, but also not. Like, there's just some weird stuff there that I don't really want to air that family dirty laundry or anything, and we can go into that later. Oh, it's just us, but like, or like not recording or whatever, but like it's just like it's a very interesting thing that even the most conservative, or not the most conservative, but the conservative older folks from the area who have been in the area for as long as the areas have existed in the American sense of the word. Obviously they're still settlers, but like, as long as that's been a thing, it's very different than these families who have like moved into the area or moved into, metropolitan parts of the region and bring different baggage with them. I think one thing I can talk about that I don't feel really weird about is my Nana correcting my accent when I was really young. I grew up with my granny, basically. My mom and dad both worked full time. Mom worked in a restaurant. Dad was a public school teacher. Most of my like early childhood was being passed between parents and granny, spending a ton of time with granny, spend the night with granny, all this kind of thing. And, I know her accent rubbed off on me a lot, like to the point where like I can point out certain things in her accent that I say, like road, she says road and I say road, like, very similarly. And so it's one of these things. 1 second, is that plugged up right? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm so sorry, I just interrupted the story. But my Nana, who grew up in the city, or she grew up in the country, but she grew up in the country from an outsider group, couple of parents. And there's some other really weird stuff there too, about like some of the other kids now live in like parts of West Virginia, Kentucky, and like and she's also the oldest. So I think she had a lot more time with the parents maybe before, being acclimated to Southwest Virginia. I don't know. I'm not going to speak on that kind of thing, but I was at her house and I was out to take a shower or something. And I was like, oh, hey, Nana, can I have like a wash rag? And she said, it's a wash cloth. And like, at the time, didn't occur to me why she even did that, but I was like, okay, a washcloth, whatever. And so I took a shower, whatever. And like, I didn't say wash for a long time after that. And it wasn't until, I got a little bit older and like, I was hanging out with Granny and I noticed she said it again. And I was like, well, why don't I say that anymore? Because I know I used to. I definitely know I used to, because I remember this memory so vividly. And it was this like thing of like having to like, I don't want to say relearn to say it, but actively not suppress it. Like, and that's the thing with an accent. It is like, we were talking about that earlier. And that's something that I talk a little bit about on TikTok. And like, I want to talk about more is people being like, oh, well, I lost my accent. Like, you didn't lose your accent. You're just suppressing it. My partner suppressed their accent for a long time. And like, they started hanging out with me and Nick and their family, and it's come back out. And like, it's and we were talking about that last night, and they were so excited that, like, no matter, even when they were suppressing their accent or code switching, when they were in Richmond in an academic setting, they would still like have words that would come out that still wouldn't be right. And it was like, I think it was for them, it was pen and pen or something like that. Like it was just like, I don't know. I think if I could tell any Appalachian, especially younger person below the age of 30 who suppressed their accent, or to their knowledge, maybe doesn't have an accent, or like remembers having an accent, but somewhere along the way it got lost, hang out with older generations in your family, hang out with them, like really just like try to relax around them, and don't associate what you feel about the area that you've been taught by outsiders to feel about your own accent. Don't think it makes you sound stupid. Don't make you think it sound like anything but your family, like, and your county and your state and your region, and going all the way back to like your ancestors and like how they sounded. And it's something to be proud of. It's something to be excited about. It's the same reason that like my mom gets that from my nana, where she like she doesn't want to say an ain't. She doesn't want like my dad saying runt. She doesn't want any of that kind of thing. And I kind of absorbed a lot of that. And then as I got older, I said, no, I'm going to say these things. Like, and then I say older, it's after I moved back. And like, I was like, embracing it and like hanging out with Granny and Papa more, and like, really trying to like actively not suppress my accent. And I was like, I don't want outside America to, prevent me from talking the way that I talked before. I don't want this sense of superiority to infect me to the point where I lose my identity as, whether you want to call that Appalachian, Southern Appalachian, country, rural, Southern in general. I don't want to lose any of those parts of my identity, in the same way that I don't want to lose my transness. Like, I feel both of those are so integral to who I am as a person, that to strip me of my Appalachian identity or my Southern or my country identity would be as equally as like heartbreaking to me for someone to treat me like a man. It's like, yeah, I'm getting a little emotional about that. I'm really sorry.
I am here. I am holding space for the emotion. And I want to validate, like, there's been multiple times. One of the consequences of moving from a single wide trailer into an apartment for the first time is that my dog now thinks that this entire apartment complex belongs to him. And so he just barks at anyone who passes by our door. I'm so sorry. But there have been a couple of moments in this conversation where I've also teared up, and I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna cry. Like, one being like the way that you're describing the cultural acceptance of like, it's not perfect acceptance the way that we would want it to be, but it's acceptance, and a couple of other moments. And so that that emotional reaction, I think, is totally valid, because it's so much of who we are. And I think I said this in the first episode, and one of the interview episodes, I think it was 4 with Gina and Raph, but it was like, the personal is political. Like, everything that is political is so deeply personal. And when you're describing your nanny, like training your accent out of you. So I had one of my grandmas was my stepdad's mom, but my stepdad and my mom did not get married until I was like an older child. And so she helped raise me long before they were actually married. And she was just, a neighbor and my mom's boyfriend's mom, who was a good Appalachian woman, was taking care of me. But she was actually from Gastonia, North Carolina originally, which is like close to the like North Carolina, South Carolina, Charlotte border, like where Carowin, and stuff is. And so while she did have like that southernness to her, it was not that Appalachian, like Southern twang. And I literally remember riding in the car with her and her saying, ain't a word. Like multiple, like training that accent out of me to such an extent. And then like the dual pain of being like, when I finally started community organizing and I was having conversations with just like strangers and neighbors on the doors and being like, yeah, I grew up here. And then when they would say to me, you don't sound like you're from around here, it would like be a fucking dagger in the heart. Cause it was just like, but I am. And like, I've experienced everything that you experienced. And like, the reason that I don't sound like I'm from around here is because like no one wants me to sound like I'm from around here, and just like trying to hold that dual, like it's such an important part of my identity, and to have someone who shares that identity be like, no, it's like heartbreaking.
Absolutely. I totally understand that.
And that language, it's all like, it goes back to fucking capitalism and white supremacy too, because it's like all in an attempt to achieve this ideal form of whiteness, right? Like if we erase our accents and we go to college and we like become this white collar professional, like we will be the ideal white people under this capitalist trash system. But it's just not. That's erasing our culture just isn't it. It's just not it. And it erases that sense of connection that comes with that culture, that sense of connection between like me and you, of being like, yes, like bluegrass and accents, and like, yes, just I'm here for it. And that sense of connection between folks of color who have had their culture erased, and like indigenous folks who literally like their children were sent to boarding schools to get rid of this shit, because that sense of connection is so powerful. Like when we are able to tap into it in the way that you've tapped into it, and that you're like, it's so like, I don't know if other people would think of it this way, but like for me, just like the act of you like moving back home, like taking full ownership over your identity and leaning into that like bluegrass, like cultural musician side, while also trying to make that accessible for other people. Like that is such an act of resistance. Like that is the embodiment of like anti-racism and anti-capitalism, because it's like, it's really breaking all of the things that they want us to not do. Like you're connecting with your culture, you're reclaiming your identity, and you're making it accessible to other folks. And that is like so fucking powerful.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I love it. I have a lot of identity crisis sometimes when it comes to being Appalachian, specifically because we were not part of the ARC until I learned the history of that, until I learned that there's a big history of, communities being excluded from the ARC despite being historically Appalachian because of capitalism, because of private interests. I think like, I don't know, I could go so much about like, so I'm sure about like talking the fire out and stopping blood and all that kind of thing. I was talking to Granny about that because like when I was younger, I burnt my finger on the lawnmower, and she called someone up, or her mom was there and was like, will someone do something for that baby? Cry, just someone do something for that baby. And so, Granny's like, well, I'll call like one of her brothers or cousins, I can't remember which, and was like, hey, Clover, burnt your finger on the lawnmower. Can you like do this? And I was like 4 years old. So like, I've been told this story. I don't remember this story, and like, apparently he said some verses out of, probably Psalms. I don't know. And it took the fire right out, and it felt better. I stopped crying immediately. I was very young. So one of those things. And, Granny talks about like people stopping the blood, that kind of thing. And it's really funny, Granny, and this goes into the trans stuff a little bit. I was like, so Granny, like, like, does anyone still do that? And she's like, oh yeah, I could talk to like blah, blah, blah. And she's like, but it's supposed to be passed down on to the opposite sex. And she goes, I don't know who'd pass it down to you. It was this weird gender like affirmation where she's like, well, maybe it would be a man. Well, but I guess it'd be a woman because, you were born, a boy. And she's like, but like, I don't know how I could explain that. So it was really funny. And then there's another story that goes along with that. Papa is like the most Christian person I know, like very traditional Baptist, like does not drink except for moonshine, but he considers that medicine. And he doesn't even drink that to get drunk. He drinks it. And I haven't seen him do that in a while either, but he'll drink it as medicine. He'll take it, for sore throat, anything like that. But he does not drink. I've never seen that man drink a beer.
Got to chase the cold away. You got to take a shot. Yeah, for sure.
But I was talking to him, and he's very deeply religious. And I was talking to Granny. This is a different time I was talking about, people talking the fire things. And hey, I don't remember what I said. And he was like, he's like, well, that's the devil. It's the devil. It's all the devil. But then he goes, but here's how you do this. And he taught me one of the ways that, like, one of the old ways of like removing warts, like, buying a wart off somebody. He taught me how to do that. He walked me through the process, but he's like, but that's the devil. So he knew how to do it. He knew the entire process, like everything that I'd heard about it before and stuff I'd never heard of before added to it that like got passed down to him. But he's like, but it's the devil. It was just this very funny, like, duality of like it's evil, but here's how you do it. Like it's I don't know if that's a common experience in Appalachia of like it being associated. And then my granny was like, it is not, Larry, you don't tell her that kind of thing. But like it was very funny that like even within my own family, there's like different opinions on what Appalachian magic really is. Like, there's Granny who like fully sees it and fully believes it. And there's Papa who obviously believes in it, but maybe thinks it's a little bit wrong or something.
I don't know that I've had that experience, but what I hear from that is like the way that like mainstream like capitalism and like white supremacy has like intentionally like villainized like cultural practices, right? It's like if you're not paying a fucking westernized doctor to take care of it, then that's the devil, right?
Yep.
That's what that is. And I recently, so I had never realized this, but like, so when I was a young kid, I'm talking like 4th, 5th grade kid, I got really into paganism, but I was raised Christian too. It's like my family was very Christian, and I had this best friend. She's still one of my close friends to this day. And we got really into Wiccanism and paganism. And she had this like little creek by our house that we would like go out there and like set up our little circles and like do all of our stuff in. And it wasn't until like really recently that I was like, well, all of this is actually more or less like just kind of like reconnecting with like traditional practices. And like there's also like these overlaps almost with, and this is, I'm probably going to get into like conspiracy territory, which is so not the content of this podcast, but is a piece of who I am. So whatever. It's like quantum physics. And like if energy is neither created nor destroyed, then like how we use that energy is actually like really fucking important because we're like shaping the energy and how like, and so like I have like beliefs around like when you're like doing healing stuff, it's because you're just shaping the energy and like the vibrations. But like a couple of years ago, I bought this book that was called like Stobbs and Ditchwater, which was all about like white trash magic. That was like, if you had to get water from ditches, like how are you going to use that ditch water for your like magical purposes and stuff like that. And so I think that it's just very much like, there's all these interconnections between like, if we can heal ourselves and take care of ourselves and like do it without having to play into this like profitable structure, like they're not going to let us do it. But then also like the reason that we can do that is because like actually things aren't as complicated as they want us to believe that they are. And like, yada, yada. So I'm entering a whole woo woo sphere now, but, but I love that story because it touches onto all of the things that I'm like, that feel relevant and important, but almost in like separate categories, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah, I know. Because there's like the magic side of thing, and there's also the traditional magic side of thing, and all of that was very interconnected. But so like I don't feel comfortable talking about the removing a wart thing because that feels very personal.
Yeah.
Because that feels like a practice. But then I've also learned some like traditional medicine stuff from both of them that like I don't mind sharing. So like one time, we were talking about sore throats, and Granny's like, well, what you do is you take a sock and you dip it in like lard or Vicks. And I guess, nowadays we use Vicks, but I guess maybe back then you dipped it in something else. And maybe there were some plants that went into it that I don't know about that would kind of equal what Vicks is today. And you would wrap that around. And then Papa goes, well, it's not just a sock. You got to wear that sock for 3 days beforehand. And then you dip it and you tie it around your throat. So
oh my gosh. Yeah, just one of those things. I remember, so as the vaccines were rolling out for the whole COVID shenanigans, I was like, so I used to work, we've got this whole like traditional medicine thing, but then also I worked at like a health food store as a cashier, like for a long time. And so I remember being like, oh, I'm about to go get my first vaccine, like in a couple of weeks. Well, I better start taken like vitamin C, vitamin D, my elderberry, like now, like in the same way that your grandpa was like, no, you got to wear it for 3 days. Like it's not good if you just tie it around your neck. But for me, I was like, oh, I got to start taking this stuff now and like start getting it into my system. And then literally for both of my initial vaccines didn't have any of like, I had a sore arm, but like the other side effects, I did not get sick. Like I didn't get the stuff. And I was like, that's because it was like, I like, for one, like took these like supplements and herbs and stuff and made my tea and my honey and whatever. But also like, I think the energy, like the putting the intention into it was like, this is what's going to happen as a result of these actions, which I think is like a lot of the Appalachian witchery is more or less just like intention setting and being like, this is what this is for. And I'm putting all of this energy and all of these good vibes into it. And like, that's what made it of the devil, was that it was like, oh, like they're like setting their own intentions and they're not relying on like other stuff for it. And like, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool.
Well, I know we're like an hour and 45 minutes or something, which is so like this conversation has been so rich. And like, I really want to keep having personal combos while they're recording because you're a phenomenal human. And Alrighty, that wraps up today's episode of Rednecks Rising with Hillbilly Gothic bluegrass musician Clover-Lynn. Don't forget to go show her some love by giving her a follow on social media. I'll have links to all of her profiles in the show notes for today's episode so you can find them quick and easy. And while you're at it, give us a follow and or throw a few bones our way on Ko-Fi. I'll drop our link tree in the show notes as well. And on that link tree, you'll find the links to all of the places that you'll be able to find us in the digital ether. Before we wrap up for today, there is just one more thing left to do. And that's find out the answer to today's trivia question. All right, come on now, Chris. I've been dying to know this one. I'm a little ashamed I didn't know it already.
Hey, Chelsea. So our trivia question today was, where did the term bluegrass music originate from? The genre is thought to be indirectly named after the state in which it came from, commonly known as the bluegrass state, Kentucky.
Of course. I should have known that one. I feel kind of dumb. Well, that wraps us up for today, folks. Y'all take care. We'll see you next week.